Hello everyone, welcome to another Stukent Expert Session. My name is Trevor Erickson and we are extremely delighted to have John Gagnon with us, who is a Bing Ads Evangelist. He's a former Google guy, a search campaign manager, and data analyst. John is a paid search expert, and that's what we are going to learn from him today. So without any further ado, John, the time is yours.
Well, thanks, Trevor, and welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to talk about paid search and actually really break down the core concepts of what paid media in paid search specifically look like. We're going to have a lot of fun, and I think when you look at the introduction to just digital marketing and paid search, you can get so into the weeds and just be looking down and go deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. But today, what we're really going to do is talk about the knowledge that you already have as business students, as PhD students, maybe even business owners on the side, and really relate all of the cool concepts and things that you've been picking up in real life into this online and digital marketing world. So we're going to stay at a high level, but should be pretty fun. We'll go down every now and then. Now, truth be told, I couldn't be more excited for you guys, actually, for me in the industry and where things are headed right now and how much fun we're about to have. And for you, you'll be right in the thick of it if you choose the path to go down into online marketing and digital. Big Black Friday is a really big deal in the U.S. We know this. Many of you probably have waited in line for hours to get $100 off, let's say, any Apple device or maybe a computer on Black Friday. But what's happening now in the industry that's so fascinating is you can imagine a scenario, and this is happening right now, where, hey, if you're trying to reach that customer, they really want to buy something. What's a moment? What are these moments that matter? And so if I were to tell you that somebody was scrolling through Facebook at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning of a mall parking lot, do you think that reaching that person would be valuable? They haven't even done a search yet, but they're looking on Facebook. Is that a valuable interaction? Likely they're in that parking lot waiting to buy something and probably to spend a lot of money on gifts, and so it's a really critical moment to be able to reach and engage consumers at this time. And when you look at digital and Facebook and Twitter and Google and Bing and all the other platforms out there, these are the scenarios that they're built for. So, how rude of me. I didn't necessarily introduce myself and give you a quick bit of background. So, hey everyone, my name's John. I'm a Bing Ads Evangelist, and really what that means is I'm a huge search nerd. I'm a data geek. I love getting into numbers, talking about online marketing strategy, and getting it out there, really learning from the experts in so many different companies and countries, as well as talking to small business owners and seeing what works and what doesn't, and sharing it with many of you as students, but also getting down and dirty with some of the really practitioner-focused agencies and SEM pros. My background, actually, before working, I've been at Bing almost 6.5 years. Before that, I actually used to work at Google down in Mountain View, so I'm really familiar with both systems. I was running the search campaign. I was a digital lead internally here at Microsoft, running accounts, running a team that was doing B2B types of management. And, of course, I spent time as an account manager, which is a very typical job that you'll see in the industry, but managing the Microsoft accounts, big-time accounts, Esurance, BlackRock, Nintendo, a lot of really big accounts, and talking about strategy, so seen it all. I do a lot of blogging and writing, so you can kind of follow me, but I have a really cool job. I have a lot of fun, which brings me here to my time with you. Now, before we get started, I wanted to ask you a question, and so I want you to maybe jot down on a piece of paper the answer to this question here is, so how much does an auto insurance company like Progressive, State Farm, Allstate, Geico, how much do they pay per click for the search auto insurance on Bing? So somebody goes into Bing, searches for auto insurance, cheap auto insurance. Somebody clicks on the ad, Geico, Allstate, Progressive, how much do they pay? So we'll go ahead and jot that down. So what's the answer? $50. $50. That's definitely a really, really, it's a big sum of money for just the click, right? I mean, nobody's actually bought anything yet. It's not 5 cents, 10 cents, it's $50 per click. You know, that is a lot of money. What's happening? Well, today we're going to talk about the auto insurance example and why people are willing to pay $50 for it. And then we're also going to talk about, at a high level, how you value a click. How much is a click worth? Then we're going to jump into this concept that's really fundamental to search, which is the search funnel. And then we're going to talk about ad copy and messaging strategy, which is important to make that connection. So we're just going to start there. Now, it's important for us to break down what a search engine is and why do people come to search engines. I mean, think for yourself. Why do you go to Google? Why do you go to Bing or Yahoo? When you're doing a search, usually what you're trying to do is look for an answer, right? Make a decision, get from point A to point B. You're looking for, let's say, a product or service or some information of some sort. Well, this is a perfect opportunity for businesses, because for the first time, not necessarily in the first time, you can think of the yellow pages in the past where people had this long list of numbers and businesses, and when they had a problem, what they do is, oh, I need a plumber. Where am I going to go? They go to the yellow pages, they break out the yellow pages and look for a plumber and make a call. Well, there are so many other research questions and things that need to be answered before you even get to the plumber, potentially, that people go to search engines for. And so a search engine and paid search marketing sits in the middle of people looking for services, getting questions answered, businesses who want to reach those customers right when they're looking for it, and of course, making sure they get to the user, the searcher, gets that right information at the right time and has a great experience. And so let's just really quickly break down a page. I think many of us have seen this every day. You probably have searched a few times today, maybe even on Facebook or who knows, or Instagram or WhatsApp these days, what the kids are doing. And so when we look at the anatomy of a search page, this is what we have for Bing. And this is the same type of layout for Google. It's the same thing. So at that middle little bar there, you have your search. In this case, we're looking for garage door repair. And this page probably looks familiar to you. Now in the orange here, we have what are called sponsored results, the ads. And they are on the top and typically on the right. And so that's a lot of space for advertising. And then in this purple and red area, we have what are called the organic listings, and these are actually free. Bing and Google, we have algorithms that go out and crawl trillions of pages on the web to figure out what's important to answer a question and what these pages are about, so we can actually go about answering a question, and we report that back. Well, that's all based on the information that you provide as a website owner and all the content on your page. And so there's a lot into that, and there's that whole kind of section of search marketing is called organic or SEO, search engine optimization on the organic side. Now on the sponsored listing side, it's actually a number of businesses coming and saying, hey, if somebody's looking for garage door repair, I want to be there. I repair garage doors. I need to reach that customer at that time. So they're two different systems. Now when we look at, we broke down just the organic results and we looked at the paid search results, and so, you know, why is this a big deal? Well, it turns out when we were looking at that page, we didn't necessarily scroll or do any interaction, but that's really uncommon. 75%, or really common, excuse me, it's common not to scroll. 75% of the users, when they're doing searches, actually don't scroll past the first page of search results. I mean, think about that. You know, 3 of every 4 people aren't really scrolling past or getting past that first page or even necessarily scrolling down. Now, when we look at where if we look at organic clicks and we say, okay, hey, I don't click on ads, I click on the organic links below. Well, it turns out of all the clicks that go to organic, there's a number of studies that it says that 60% of those clicks happen on the top 3 results. 60% of the clicks on the organic section of the page go to the top 3. So that means all the other listings that are out there are fighting for what? For that remaining 40%. So if you're not on top, if you're not number 1, 2, or 3, you're really missing out. Well, it turns out when we look now at paid search ads, you kind of see something similar. Now, a study on Bing that was done said that the click-through rate for the top search result is close to 10%. But the number 4 result, which typically is on the top right-hand corner, drops all the way almost to 2%. I mean, what a huge difference. And that click-through rate, again, is that engagement. How many times out of 100, how many people are clicking on that number 1 ad? Well, it turns out almost about 10. And then for out of 100, how many people are clicking on number 4? About 2. I mean, such a substantial drop-off. So being on top really, really matters. All right, so this is chance for redemption. Earlier, we talked about car insurance, and I asked you how much per click does Geico, Allstate, or State Farm pay Bing for the term cheap auto insurance? And it turned out that it was $50. So, guys, I don't know, maybe you can open up a new tab because I'm boring you right now, but do a search and tell me how much Jimmy Choo shoes cost. Now, I'm lucky. I'm married, and my wife actually told me the other day. I think they can be kind of ridiculous. Up to $1,500, but you can get a pair for $600 to $800, which seems like an incredible amount of money for some high heels. Luckily, my wife does not buy them, so I'm fairly happy with that. But how much if Jimmy Choo shoes cost $600 to $1,500 a pair? How much are retailers, let's say Neiman Marcus or Nordstrom or Jimmy Choo, paying per click for the term Jimmy Choo shoes? So go ahead and write that number on the side. So what is it? Actually, it turns out it's about $1 to $2. So, in the example before, we had $50 for auto insurance, and now Jimmy Choo shoes, wait, it's only worth $1. What's going on here? Well, this is one of the very first concepts of search marketing and talking about the value of how much we pay per click. So let's talk about each one of these products. So what happens with auto insurance? Well, you're going to sign up for a policy, and it may be $150 to $300 a month. Insurance is really expensive, but you don't just sign on for 1 month. You typically sign on for a 6-month commitment. So I mean, you're talking about $900 to $1,800 for that policy for 6 months. You get one person to sign up. That's a lot of money. Now for Jimmy Choo, you're talking about $600 plus. But what it really comes down to is that second column is the margin. Well, what are our costs involved in selling everything? Well, in retail, costs are pretty heavy. You have a lot of overhead. Jimmy Choo's probably taking a really fat margin on their product. And so let's just say for the Jimmy Choo example, for that $600+ shoe, as a retailer, we pocket about $100 in our pocket. Now, as in the auto insurance example, we don't have to ship anybody any goods, but we have risk that we need to mitigate for. We have to underwrite and make sure we're paying out policies. And let's just say, on average, per customer that we sign up, we make around $400 over those 12 months. So we have how much money not just how much revenue we've charged, but how much money we make. Now what we go to is, well, all right, we got these clicks that are coming to my page and trying to buy auto insurance or to buy shoes. What's really happening here? Well, when we look at this, what we look at is a ratio, and really what we're saying is if that click happened 100 times, how many sales would we get? How many conversions would we get? We call this a conversion rate. So for auto insurance, it can be really high, 8 to 12%, upwards of 12%. People don't necessarily like to do a lot of comparison shopping on auto insurance. If they find a price that works or maybe is a little bit cheaper than their policy, they're ready to buy and get going. It's a pain in the butt. Now for Jimmy Choo shoes, it's a little bit different. And you guys can see this. If you're going to be spending $600 or more on a pair of shoes, you better make sure they fit. You better make sure that you love the feel of it, that you can walk in them, they look the right way, all of that, because you're making a big investment. And you may not actually get that opportunity online. And so in this case, what we might have is a tremendous amount of, let's call them windows, the equivalent of a window shopper online, where somebody's going and checking out Jimmy Choo shoes, seeing what the prices are, and buying them in store. And so online, the number of sales that we get per 100 clicks is a lot lower. It turns out it's about 1 to 2 sales per 100 clicks. Now let's really dive into this margin and conversion rate section, and let's do a quick translation between some of the business terms that we're seeing into online marketing. And so let's just focus on auto insurance. We talked about how much money they make, $400 per policy, and so that's the margin per sale we understand. Well, in search marketing, we call that the CPA, which is cost per action. And so CPA, $400. Now, what's that ratio of sales to how sales we make to 100 clicks? Well, that's what we call the conversion rate. And then how much are we willing to pay per click? Well, it's actually a pretty simple math formula. You take 400, you multiply it by 12%, and you actually get the break-even cost that you would need, or you'd be willing to pay up to $48 per click, and you'd still be able to make money. Now for Jimmy Choo, this is how the math works out. We have $100 on their margin, their CPA. We have 1 to 2 sales per 100. Their conversion rate's 1 to 2%. Multiply those two together, and you can see there we have $1 or $2. So this is a very important concept, because in search marketing, in the paid search side of things, the more money you're willing to pay, the higher you're able to show up. Now, we don't want, search engines don't just want people who are going to pay a lot of money. We want to make sure that users and searchers are getting that relevant information, because how easy is it to go from Google to Bing or vice versa? There's no cost to it. It's just a habit. And so you really want to show up on top. Now, if you're a marketer, where would you rather be? You know that 75% of people don't scroll past the first result. Many of us don't even scroll below the fold. And so do you want to be above or below? You want to be on top. And there's really good reason. When you break down and look at the number of clicks, this is for a different term, Office 365, which is a brand term. You can think of Excel and Word, all of that online. It turns out when you break down all of the clicks to the paid search ads that you're getting, 73%, an unbelievable amount, are going to that top result. And everything else, if you look on the right-hand side there, only 2%, less than 2% are actually going to that right-hand rail. So if you're not in position 1, 2, or 3, you're really missing out on a ton of clicks. So you need to be on top. You need to be able to afford a lot. Going even further, this is another example looking at just car insurance and breaking down, hey, what does the number of clicks look like by position? So that top spot that we had on the page, position 1, the one under it, position 2, and you can see all the way through 10 here. Looking at the number of clicks by position, what do you notice? After you get past spot number 4, there's virtually no click volume coming. It's not to say that there's not clicks, just not very many. And so we want to be able to, in search, be on top for a lot of different reasons, but we want to be on top more for everything. And that's why we talk about break-even CPC and being number 1, because that's one of our main factors. So, gosh, you know, I've done, I don't even know how many conferences and talks and different things over the years. Gosh, but I want to say like 3, 4, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was at a conference in Orlando, and I was talking to a lot of lawyers, and it was a group of like a couple hundred lawyers that wanted to do search marketing. So we broke down some strategies, and you know, before the talk, one of the things I thought was like, oh, lawyers, you know, you always hear how do you start off a presentation? Kick it off with a joke, you know, break it down. I'm like, perfect. There are thousands of lawyer jokes online. So I did what a lot of people would do. I went to search. Went on Bing, I searched for lawyer jokes, and you got a lot of results here, so a lot of lawyer jokes. But one of the things that really hit me when I looked at this and preparing was that there were a lot of ads showing up. Here I am preparing for a presentation, not looking for any kind of attorney or personal injury help or accident or anything of that nature. I'm looking for a joke, and I've even said that specifically. But yet we have all of these ads showing. And so it turns out that, you know, this is probably not a really good experience for these advertisers to have. And so there is this concept in search marketing called a negative keyword, because what you tell a search engine is, hey, this is what my customers are looking for. But on the same token, you can also say, this is what I know they're not looking for. They're not looking for jokes Or maybe I'm located in Seattle or Denver. I'm not located in, I don't have any offices, I don't do anything in New York or Chicago. And so I want to make sure if anybody's looking for Chicago lawyer or New York lawyer, I don't show up. And so there's a lot of tools and levers here to not just tell the search engines what you want to show up for as a business, but also what not to show up for. And that's really important when you're planning your strategy. So let's just come back to this whole concept of a break-even CPC. We talked about it. Again, it's just really simple. It's your how much money you make per action times your conversion rate, and that gives you that break-even point. So if we looked at an umbrella, again, just to reinforce that example, if we looked at an umbrella, I know I make $35 when I have that sale. Or excuse me, I sell it for $35. It cost me $10 as far as inventory when I bought it from London Fog, which is this brand of umbrella. So I can afford to pay $25 for this umbrella. So that's my profit. Now, conversion rate. We've looked at the history that we've had in the past, and we see how many clicks that we actually get for these umbrellas and how many sales that we've had. And out of 100, we have 4 out of 100, which is 4%. Multiply those together, and it turns out again into $1. Now, when we're looking at it, this is the math, that top example, $25 times 4%. Now, again, we want to show up on top. And so because we want to show up higher in the search results to get way more clicks, it's important for us to be able to pay a little bit more. That's one of our main levers that we have. Well, to do that, you have to be able to afford it. If I paid $2 for that umbrella, I told you just now that I can pay at most $1. So if I'm paying $2, I lose money, and that's really bad. So to be able to be more competitive in search, one of the things that marketers have to do is really look at what are the levers that we have, and in this case, increasing that conversion rate, that ratio of how many sales I make to for every 100 clicks that I receive for this term is really important. So what are some of the ways that we'd actually go about doing that? One of the funnest ways to do that is through landing page testing. There's a lot of really cool tools out there, optimizely.com, Unbounce, and Visual Website Optimizers, endless tools, but you can go in and test and do so many different things to pages. One of the really common tests that people run are button tests. And so, you're telling marketers, hey, what are you missing out on? This is the value I'm bringing. And then you're telling them to act. So they're already on your page and you're telling them to act. How are you getting them to convert? And so button testing is really common. And so, based on the need to show up higher for an internal product that we did many years ago, what we did was we said, hey, let's test buttons. We want to increase our conversion rate so we can afford to pay more and do better. So we had our big landing page, and in that landing page had the top image above the fold was this image here, which is, do you want to reach more customers, free help, et cetera, et cetera. And we had this button which said sign up. Now, sign up doesn't necessarily confer value, like, hey, you're going to click this button and get signed up, but it doesn't necessarily say, what you're about to do other than sign up. That's not necessarily a valuable term. So we thought, hey, real quick, what if we just ran a quick message test and tried something different, like launch your campaign as a button, or get started. And so all we did on that landing page was change this button and looked at launch your campaigns and get started and to see, hey, was there any difference? Did it get better? Did it get worse? What happened? Well, it turned out that launch your campaigns worked by much better, actually by 11%. And so we were able to either make more 11% more money or pay 11% more and get more volume. And so these kinds of tests are really important in search, and it gives you a fundamental understanding of some of the levers that we have. So we just talked about break-even CPC, the whole concepts of taking some of those terms of conversion rate and negative keywords. We talked about landing page testing and all the knobs and levers that you have. But the big thing, again, is what your business is, or marketers know what their business is. What they need to do is just connect it to some of these online marketing concepts. So now let's switch to a really big one, which is the search funnel. And in search marketing, this thought is kind of one of the fundamental pieces of how we operate. So the search funnel is important, but let's really quickly just take a step back and think about what the flow of the searcher looks like. So, this is probably not unfamiliar to you. You go to a search box, and so you type in your search here. After you've done that, you receive a search page, and on that page has a bunch of listings, some of them paid, some of them organic, and you find the information that you're looking for, you click on it. Then you go to a landing page, and on that landing page has the message that the marketer and the business wants you to see. They have the product that you've been looking for, and they want you to buy it because of the value proposition and all the things that they have on their page. And let's say that it worked. So they go to buy it, they check out, and money's in, the searcher gets what they need, and you as a business get a sale. You make cash. Everybody's happy. Everybody wins. So that's what the typical search flow looks like. But what's interesting is in search, let's break down some of the terminology a little bit. So when somebody does a search and then their ad shows, so that when their ad shows, that's actually called an impression. So going from that search box and then boom, hey, their ad is showing in the paid search results. Now that's called an impression. If somebody goes and they read that search result and now click on it, they respond to it, almost like a vote of, hey, this is important to me. We call that a click. Now, when they're on the landing page and they're seeing your message and they see the price and they're feeling really good about what you offer, they buy that, they click on it and they buy it. They go to the thank you page. We call that a conversion. And so this process of going from seeing the ad to engaging with the ad and then going to your landing page and buying the product is huge in the overall landscape of search. And so these are really important pieces to know. Now, when we look at this further, okay, so we have the impression, we have the click, and we have the conversion. As marketers, we love to look a little bit at some of these ratios. And so now when we start to say, hey, it's not just about my ad showing or me getting clicks. The thing that we really need to know is how effective is my ad? How good is that ad that I have out there? I mean, maybe I could offer free shipping. I could, instead of highlighting the benefits, I could create a sense of urgency or highlight what they're missing out on. I have all these different strategies I can use to be really, really creative. How can I measure that? Well, here are the tools for you. We have a lot of different things that, as far as terminology, but when we look at that ratio of how many times your ad got shown to how many times it got clicked, we call that the click-through rate. And then when we look at, hey, well, you got a ton of clicks to your page, but did you make a sale? What that ratio is, the number of sales you made to the number of clicks that it took to get that sale. We call that the conversion rate. And so these actually help you figure out the effectiveness of your ad for the click-through rate and the effectiveness of your landing page for conversion rate. Now we can get into a lot of different slices on that, but really those are the big things that these metrics measure. But, this is almost like a marketing machine. Hey, I have my ad. Is it showing? It's good. Go to the landing page. I'm good at selling and moving everything on. Fantastic. But what really matters is what people are looking for. If somebody's looking for, let's say, a customer service support line for auto insurance or filing a claim, they already have auto insurance. They're not necessarily looking to buy. You can't necessarily convince them to buy insurance, especially at the moment that they need it. So this is kind of junk in, junk out. But somebody says, buy auto insurance now, and that's what they type into the search engine. You better believe that that is a critical moment to reach them. And so what goes into this search box matters. And so what we start to think about a little bit more mentally is something that you're probably accustomed to. And so the question becomes, and think about this in your day-to-day, how do I search? What do I start with? What questions am I answering? Just be paying attention to that over the next week. It could be on your phone, it could be on your tablet, it could be, on your computer at school. What are you looking for? Well, it turns out when we look at this behavior, it's actually really interesting. Now, people can come in and out of these different points, but in general, it kind of kicks off with initial research. So let's just say in general right now that we're a small business looking to advertise. So I might come to a search engine and look at advertise my business or options to advertise my business. After some reading, I realized that advertising on TV is not going to work for me. The yellow pages aren't a great option. Actually, what I want to do is I want to look for online marketing channels. And I have some in mind, but really I need some tips. I need to do a little bit more information. So now we're getting a little bit more specific. And then we've come across this really amazing tool called search marketing. and they have paid search and organic. There's so many great options here. I think this is really what I want, because this is where users and searchers, where I get to meet them and talk to them right when they need what I offer. And after a little bit more research, what you figure out is, hey, some advertising networks have better conversion rates or a little bit cheaper than others. So I'm going to start with this specific brand, brand X. In this case, hey, Bing, advertising on Bing is where I want. And so we went on this journey of going from the need to advertise a business all the way down to a specific brand. And so this, in many ways, is what we call the search funnel. Again, going from that interest and that research phase to purchase and getting ready to make a decision. And so, in your mind, as you're thinking about your search activity and what this looks like, be thinking of this funnel, that the top of the funnel isn't as close to the path to purchase as the bottom of the funnel. And so you can see what those differences are. Going back to that auto insurance example, if somebody is looking at a policy claim, well then there you go, right there. That's probably, they're not necessarily interested or need auto insurance. But if that claim goes bad, they might be looking at different options. But if somebody's looking at get discount on Progressive insurance, they are interested in Progressive insurance. They're looking for a deal. They're ready to pull the trigger if they can find the right price. That is somebody you want to compete with. So be thinking about where some of these terms and where people would be for your business or your friends' businesses, and think about it in terms of this funnel, higher or lower. This is very important. Because when it comes down to it, what we're going to be building, a lot of our content and our ads and our landing pages would be based on what people are searching for. So if somebody is looking for a review on advertising networks, well, if I tell them, here's $100 coupons, you better sign up for Bing right now, that's probably not going to work. But if somebody says advertise on Bing and I send them $100 coupons, they get started right now, that's a great experience. That's something that they're looking for. And so what I need to be doing as a marketer, as a search marketer or digital marketer in general, is be thinking about where are we capturing in the funnel or in the process, the customer journey, where am I communicating with them, and what is that next right step for them? In some cases, it's going to be closing the deal to get that coupon. In other cases, it's going to be providing, let's say, testimonials on how we work versus Google, or, again, back to the auto insurance example, like what the difference is between Geico, Allstate, et cetera, et cetera. And so what happens is when you're building out an account as a marketer and you're figuring all this out, you pretty quickly come to an account outline or a map, and you think about, okay, so what are some of the terms that people are doing when they're doing the initial research for what I offer? What are some of the pieces that might indicate that they know a little bit about what they want, but maybe not completely the solution? In this case, we have like online or internet marketing. And then, we talked about the field name. So search marketing. Well, search is called in many things. There's pay-per-click, there's PPC, the abbreviation, paid search, sponsored links, search marketing, SEM, all of that. And then now back to the specific brands. You have Bing Ads, Yahoo, Ad Center, you have Google, you have so many other options. And you want to get a map of this, because that is what's going to matter to help you reach, again, and create those experiences, not just what ad they're seeing, but what landing page they're going to get to, what information we're going to show, etc. Oftentimes, what I like to do is, before we start, I'm working even with the biggest product groups, is to think about, or even the biggest Fortune 500, is to think about, what are the highest margin or the best goods that make sense for them to sell online right now. It's not everything. Jimmy Choo shoes isn't necessarily, it's not that you shouldn't advertise, but that's not made for online advertising. If you're starting up, you really want to focus on the things that make a lot of sense online. So write that down. And then what we want to do is to be thinking about our business and think about, how are we different than our competitors? Have we won awards? Maybe we've been in business longer. We won a J.D. Power Award for customer service. We offer the lowest price. What is that? So you write that down, and then you get to seasonal offers, maybe promotions you're running, incentives that you have. And then you do some math on, like, hey, how much money is it worth if I make a sale? What's that margin look like? When are my peak times? When are all these things happening? Well, if you can do this exercise, you can come up with the beginning pieces, the fundamental building blocks for a search marketing campaigns. search marketing campaign, because the product that you have is going to lead to the keywords. The differences are going to lead to the ad copy, and then of course how much you're willing to pay. We just went over all that. It's going to lead to how much you're willing to pay, which is your bid. So you have the searches, the search funnel, the entry point you're reaching people. That's called a keyword, and then the message that you're hitting them with on that search results page is the ad copy. That's the ad. And so this unit of making sure that you reach a search mark or somebody who's a search user when they're searching for a specific topic with the right message at the right time in that ad, that's the basic building block of a search marketing campaign. So that's an example ad there. So let's say that, and so this is what it looks like. We actually have something called an ad group, and all an ad group is the combination of a keyword, what people are looking for, what they're searching for, and then an ad, which is, ad copy. You guys, we know what ads look like. They're all standard on search marketing, so that kind of thing. So it's a keyword and ad. If you have those together, that is actually called an ad group. And so a good rule of thumb is when you put these groups together, you typically want 10 to 30 keywords. You want them to be closely related. You don't want to go from buy auto insurance now to Geico reviews or Allstate versus Geico, because those are different needs. And so if I'm hitting them with an ad that just talks about reviews but they want a discount, well, that's not good. And if I can't connect them to a landing page that doesn't have that discount, that's not going to be as great as it could be either. It's not to say that it wouldn't work, but it's one of those things that you start to think about a little bit more, because we want to optimize that experience of what they're searching for, what message we show them, and what landing page they go to. And here's just a quick example. Let's talk about if I was a florist and I was doing weddings. Well, in one ad group, I'd have a wedding flowers, and so I'd have keywords like wedding florist, Seattle wedding florist, so I was in Seattle, wedding flowers or wedding bouquet, and then maybe I'd focus on, let's say, quick quote or great service or award-winning types of terms in my ad copy to make that message come clear. But I wouldn't put things like chocolate tower or chocolate fountain, because they're not looking for that. Or photo booth, they might be looking for that in the wedding, but what I need to hit them with and what they're going to respond to when they see that ad is they're looking for wedding flowers. I need to hit them with that. So now let's switch gears a bit. We're going to talk about effective ads. But before we do, what we just talked about is a search funnel. Visualize what that looks like and where the searches that you're looking at, maybe you're doing on a day-to-day basis or that you're seeing when you're putting together and using some tools that are out there, where do they lie in that search funnel? Are those people really ready to buy, or are they really just looking at doing some initial research? And that's going to dictate a lot of how you group things and what pages they look at, that whole search flow that we broke down. So let's talk a little bit about search ads. It turns out that this is one of those fundamental pieces in search, because you can test ads and learn things and repeat. And so in that top ad here, what do we have? We actually have a picture, we have an ad that talks about same-day delivery and that we're a family florist. But we call these things out a little differently. In ad A, we don't say family in the title. We only say it in the description. But down below, we try it a little bit differently, and we say family in the title, and we also put it out, for mom here, and talk about, just use a little bit of capitalization. And it turns out that these different types of ads are going to get different responses. And so the click-through rate, that effectiveness measure that we talked about earlier, 7 clicks out of 100 for ad A, is lower than ad B. So what we could see if we were trying these two ads and saying, hey, what message resonates, we'd know, hey, wait a second, looks like things and components of ad B are really helping out. What can we do to build on that further? Because there are an innumerable number of combinations that you can use to test out ads. I mean, there's so many different strategies. You have only so many characters that everybody can look at. You have headlines and body copy, but really you need to have things like a call to action, make clear your value proposition, which is why should somebody buy from you and not your competitors, and of course things like emotional appeal and how are we tugging on all those different heartstrings and everything else. But there's so many other strategies. There's so many different changes that we need a framework to look at this and think about, how do I build out what I'm trying to do in an effective way as a marketer? So I'm just going to throw out one of my favorite resources. It's called Marketing Experiments, marketingexperiments.com. That image earlier was actually from Boost CTR, boostmedia.com. Great blog, great research there too. But marketingexperiments.com has fundamentally changed the way that I've thought about online marketing, and so I wanted to show you guys that. So definitely go check that out. But they have something they call the conversion sequence. And what they break down is they've done tests with thousands of clients and thousands of tests with hundreds of clients, and what they found is that this is more or less the formula that it takes to drive a conversion. And so let me read this to you, and this is not something you put your numbers into, but it gives a sense of weight. That the probability of your conversion is equal to 4, the biggest, times the motivation, which is when you reach that user. Think search, think if it's mobile or device, so like when you reach that user. Plus 3 times the clarity of the value proposition, which is why somebody should buy from you and not your competitor. Plus 2 times any incentives that we're offering, promos, free shipping, etc. Minus any friction that they have in the process. Think about putting in information, credit card information, minus any anxiety that they feel. They don't trust you. So this sequence gives you an idea of what things to prioritize. The clarity of how you can communicate, how you differentiate from your competitors is huge, and also when you reach them. That's why we focus a lot on what searches we're putting in. So if we were to apply this in action, we can do this for ad copy, not just our landing pages, not just our campaigns. And so here all I've done is just taken the different components and pillars and I've broken them down. And what we see here is, value prop. What are some ideas of how we can do it? Well, are we highest quality? Or are we offering the lowest price? Maybe we have the greatest selection and convenience. What does that look like in messaging? Well, there's an endless amount of ways, but my point in saying all this is, when we're not looking to test out one word, but we're looking to test out a strategy of how do I increase the incentive that I'm looking at? Well, there's multiple ways to do that. And then how it reaches in messaging and landing page and ad copy is important. But the point is, be thinking strategically about the tests that you're putting down for your companies instead of looking at things word by word in isolation, really looking down in the weeds. It's not to say that that's bad, but there's so much richness that you can have by looking at a higher level. Wow, honestly, I can't believe how quickly this has gone. You might be tired of listening to me. For that, I apologize. I hope some of you guys had a great time. But here's what we covered today. What we talked about was the break-even CPC strategy and the simple formula there that talked about the value of a click. How much money do I make CPA times how good I am at converting people out of 100 conversion rate, and that tells me how much money I can pay. Value and click, that's really big. The second thing we talked about was the search funnel and how the search funnel is really important when we reach them in that process of research. Or are they ready to buy? That's going to dictate a lot. That's a very important piece. The search funnel helps us organize our thinking. And the third piece is that messaging. That response and engagement is the other piece that tells us, that really drives our ad to the top. If you have great engagement, you're going to show up higher. And so what are the things that we can test? How do we look at this? And how do we really move things forward? So those are actually the really big questions that I had, or really big points that I had. There's so much awesomeness we could actually go through, but I know that we have a couple of questions. And so I want to spend just a few minutes going through questions, and let's go ahead and get started. So the question that I have here is, hey, John, I'm a small business with a low budget. Can I even compete with the big brands in their large budgets? Well, this is a great question, and the answer is absolutely yes, you can. When you have a small budget, the thing to be thinking about is where you can really win, right? Like, what is that message that we're getting across to? It turns out that a lot of consumers really love local businesses, and that's something that big brands can't compete with. So you might want to highlight that in your ad copy. You might want to put pieces that show, we have these things called extensions that put your kind of pin on a map, and it shows that you're local. So like that piece is actually really valuable. That's actually why somebody should buy from you and not your competitor. And the other piece is, there are some terms you want to really pick your battles and be smart on which terms that you want. What I would say is we call them longer tail terms, but maybe more words in a keyword. So not just plumber, but maybe like a specific neighborhood in Seattle would be a Queen Anne plumber. clean and plumbing services now, emergency clean and plumbing services. Pick your battles and focus there. So that's a big tip there. You can absolutely win. And then another great question is, what's the biggest mistake you see people make in their ad copy? The number one cardinal sin is not to test out different ads. You're leaving so much money on the table. I think that's a really big one. If I look past that, it's going to be, it's not thinking about answering that question of why. Why should somebody buy from you and not your competitor? And really just following what your competitors are doing. You can get ideas from competitors, but you don't want to. You want your value to really shine through. And so thinking about what that looks like, testing it out, and of course, figuring out which things resonate so you can build on it. Don't just test one thing. After you figure out what works, go and try something else. It looks like those are the questions that we have today. I know that it's been a good amount of time that we've had together. Just wanted to say thank you very much. If you have any questions, go ahead and hit me up on Twitter. You can see my Twitter handle there, JMGAGNON. Thank you very much for your time, and good luck, and have a great rest of the week.